My daughter threw me out when I visited her during Christmas. She said, "You are not needed here. I don't want my in-laws to meet you when they visit." I smiled and left. The next morning, she called me begging me to return when she found out that I put the house she was staying in with her husband on sale. What happened next was rather unexpected. I really made her regret her actions. Let me tell you everything. I'm not the type of man who shows up uninvited. I never have been. I was raised to respect boundaries, to wait for a phone call or an invitation before stepping into someone's space, especially my daughter's. But that year, something gnawed at me from the inside out. It started right after Thanksgiving when I spent the holiday alone, microwaving a frozen dinner in front of the TV while watching families on commercials laugh around tables that looked nothing like mine. Then came my birthday in early December, just a short, impersonal text from Brianna. No call, no card. I told myself she was busy, caught up with her own life, as usual. But as the days crawled toward Christmas, I could feel a hollowness building in my chest. Not grief, I knew. Grief was sharp, loud, and immediate when my wife died 3 years ago. This was something quieter, like a slow ache that had settled into my bones. I kept hearing my wife's voice in the back of my mind. "She's your daughter, David. Don't let too much time pass between visits." So I decided to go. No phone call, no warning. I just packed a small overnight bag, baked the peanut butter cookies Brianna used to love as a girl, wrapped up a scarf I thought would go with the camel coat she'd posted about on Instagram, and got in the car. It was a long drive, 3 hours, give or take, but I barely noticed the time. My mind drifted through memories as I watched the frost-covered trees whip by. I remembered Brianna's first Christmas concert, her high school graduation, the nights I sat up with her during college finals week while she cried over a breakup. I had been there. Always. I hadn't said much. I was never a talker, but I showed up, quietly and consistently. I paid for her wedding, gifted her the house she now lived in, and never once tried to control her life. I stayed out of her way because I thought that's what good fathers did when their daughters became women. I thought my presence, even in the background, mattered. And maybe that's why, when I finally pulled into her driveway and saw the warm glow of Christmas lights wrapped around the porch, I allowed myself to feel something like hope. Her house looked beautiful, bright, inviting, exactly how my wife would have wanted it. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, collecting myself. Then I grabbed the cookies, the gift bag, and walked up the steps, my boots crunching in the snow. I knocked twice, heart thumping in my chest like I was showing up for a job interview. I figured she'd be surprised, maybe even annoyed at first, but then she'd see it was me, and that would soften her. She'd say, "Dad, what are you doing here?" And I'd smile, shrug, maybe make a dumb joke about Santa making me do it. Instead, the door creaked open slowly, and I was met with the kind of look you reserve for someone who's overstayed their welcome. Her face was perfect, makeup done, hair curled, red lipstick untouched, but her eyes held none of the warmth I'd hoped for. She blinked, almost startled, and for a second, I thought she was going to hug me. But then her expression tightened. "Dad," she said, stepping halfway out onto the porch and pulling the door mostly closed behind her. I smiled and lifted the cookie tin slightly. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said. "Merry Christmas." She looked past me, then back at me, lips pursed. You shouldn't have come. You're not needed here." The words landed like a brick in my chest. I stood there, not fully understanding. "What?" I asked, half laughing, thinking I must have misheard. She crossed her arms, glancing nervously over her shoulder like someone inside might see us. "You're not needed here," she said again, slower this time. "I don't want my in-laws to meet you. They'll be here soon. It's not the right time." My hands gripped the cookie tin tighter. "Not the right time?" I echoed, stunned. "I drove 3 hours to see you, Brianna." She looked guilty for a half second, then turned stone again. "I didn't ask you to come." I stood frozen. For a man who'd buried a wife and survived a heart scare last spring, I'd thought I could handle just about anything. But nothing prepared me for that moment. The girl I'd raised, fed, clothed, and loved with my whole damn heart, standing on the porch of the house I gave her, telling me I wasn't wanted. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just nodded once, swallowed hard, and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "All right then," I said quietly. I bent down and placed the cookie tin on the doormat, tucked the gift bag beside it, and turned around. She didn't say another word, didn't stop me, didn't ask if I had somewhere to go. I walked back to my car, my spine stiff, my breath visible in the cold air. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there for a minute. Her front door shut softly behind me, like a chapter closing without ceremony. No wave, no apology, just silence. I stared at the steering wheel, my jaw clenched tight enough to hurt. I didn't know what to feel: embarrassed, heartbroken, stupid, maybe all three. I backed out of the driveway and drove toward the highway, my chest hollow, my hands steady even though my whole world had just tilted sideways. The motel I found was one of those roadside places with peeling paint and flickering neon signs. I paid in cash, took the key, and walked into a room that smelled faintly of bleach and old cigarette smoke. I dropped my bag near the bed and sat down slowly. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, staring at the floor, letting the coldness from earlier settle into my bones. That phrase echoed in my mind like a looped recording. "You're not needed here." I thought about every basketball game I drove her to, every time I stood outside in the freezing rain waiting for her to finish choir practice, every doctor's appointment, every night my wife and I argued because I said yes to something Brianna needed when the budget said no. I thought about all of it, and then I thought about the deed to that house sitting in my lockbox back home, with my name still at the top. And that was when something in me broke, not in a violent way, but like a dam slowly giving way after years of pressure. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done pretending. Done being the silent, invisible father who gave and gave until there was nothing left. I laid back on that stiff motel bed, closed my eyes, and made a quiet promise to myself. One she'd never see coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid down. I closed my eyes. But rest never came, not in the way I needed it to. The mattress was too firm, the heater rattled every 10 minutes, and the streetlights leaked through the blinds in thick orange bars. But the real noise was in my mind, playing every second of what happened on Brianna's porch in high definition. I kept rewinding it, her voice flat and final, her arms crossed like I was a solicitor peddling something she never asked for. I could still feel the sting of that cold wind hitting my face the second she stepped outside, as if the universe had decided to echo the moment with weather. The words haunted me more than I expected. Not wanted. Not needed. I'd heard people talk about being estranged from their kids. The guys at work, the barber down the street, even my brother once when his son got into drugs, but I never imagined it would be me. Me, who gave up every fishing trip, every Saturday golf game, every promotion that meant moving away just to be home for her. And this was where it ended. Me alone in a cheap motel on Christmas Eve, being told I didn't belong in the life I helped build. By 4 a.m., I was still staring at the ceiling, eyes dry but chest tight. I got up, turned on the lamp, and sat at the little writing desk by the window. There wasn't much in the room, just a pen, a cheap notepad with the motel's logo at the top, and an old Gideon Bible in the drawer. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album. The first picture was Brianna on the day she graduated college, her arms around me, cap tilted, that crooked grin she inherited from her mother. Then came her wedding photos. I had paid for nearly everything. I even walked her down the aisle alone because her mother was already gone by then, and I remember thinking as I held her arm, this is the last thing I can truly give her. I paid off the house they now lived in as a wedding gift. No mortgage, no strings, just a father's love, wrapped in drywall and a roof. I even had the foresight to keep it in my name, not because I didn't trust her, but because I thought it would be easier if anything ever went wrong. I never imagined I'd be the one she tried to cut out. I sat there in that motel room, the cookie tin still in the car, the wrapped scarf probably unopened on her porch, and I let the weight of it all settle over me like snow. I thought about calling her, thought about texting her something soft, something forgiving, like, I understand, or maybe next year. But I didn't, because it wasn't just about Christmas. This had been coming for a long time, hadn't it? The way she pulled away after the wedding. The short phone calls, the missed holidays, the carefully curated Instagram life that had no room for me. Her husband, Grant, he was always polite, always distant, a man who treated me like one of his employees rather than his wife's father. I tolerated it because I thought that was the nature of modern families. But I saw the way she shifted over time, started speaking differently, dressing more polished, laughing less around me. Like my presence reminded her of a past she was trying to outgrow. And still, I had kept giving. Quietly, willingly, foolishly maybe. I paid the property taxes on that house every year. I covered a surprise plumbing bill last fall when she called in a panic. I never mentioned any of it to anyone. That was just what fathers did. Or so I believed. But that night, as I sat in the faded glow of the motel lamp, I realized something bitter and liberating. She didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a utility, a background figure, someone who existed only when she needed something, and disappeared conveniently when she didn't. I think what hurt the most wasn't her words. It was how easy they seemed to come to her, how she didn't hesitate, how natural it was for her to send me away. By the time the sun began to rise, throwing a dull pink glow across the parking lot, I had made my decision. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with anger or heat. It came quietly, like a man realizing the stove's been on for too long. I picked up my phone and called my realtor. His name was Calvin. We'd gone to high school together. He answered on the second ring, a little surprised to hear from me. I told him I needed to put a property up for sale, the house at Brianna's address. He paused for a second, then said, "You sure?" I told him yes. Absolutely. I wanted it listed immediately. I asked him to handle the paperwork and to make sure an official notice went out by the end of the day. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Got it," and promised to move fast. I hung up and sat back in the chair, the kind of stillness settling over me that only comes after a firm decision. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pettiness. It was a boundary, one that should have been drawn years ago but was finally being inked in now. I wasn't going to beg for a place in my own daughter's life. I wasn't going to keep offering pieces of myself to someone who had made it clear I was disposable. If I couldn't be welcomed into the home I bought, then they shouldn't get to live there like I was some forgotten footnote in their perfect little narrative. It was time they learned that generosity has its limits, and I had finally reached mine. As the light grew stronger, I took a shower, got dressed, and packed my things. I stopped at the front desk to return the key. The girl behind the counter, no older than 20, smiled and wished me a Merry Christmas. I nodded politely, said nothing. I got back in the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove into town. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't need to. The paperwork would speak for me. I found a small diner on the edge of town, ordered black coffee and eggs over easy, and stared out the window as I waited. Somewhere, not far from here, my daughter was waking up in the house I gave her, unaware that everything was about to change. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt resolute. The call came just after noon. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee in the diner, nursing it slowly like it was the only thing anchoring me to the ground. The place was nearly empty, just me, a truck or two booths down, and a couple of retirees talking softly over pancakes. The waitress, a kind woman with tired eyes, kept checking on me, probably wondering why I was sitting alone on Christmas morning without so much as a smile. But I couldn't bring myself to fake it. My phone buzzed on the table, and I saw Brianna's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. But something in me, maybe habit, maybe a shred of curiosity, made me swipe and hold it to my ear. I didn't say anything right away, just listened. And there she was, breathless, panicked, voice shrill in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager and lost her first job. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" she snapped. "I just got an email from a realtor saying the house is being listed. Our house." I didn't answer her right away. I let the silence stretch, let her feel it. Then I said, as calmly as I could manage, "It's not your house, Brianna. It's mine." She stammered something incoherent, then settled on indignation. "You can't just do that. You can't kick us out. We live here." I took a breath, long and steady. "You told me I wasn't needed there, that you didn't want your in-laws meeting me, that I wasn't welcome in my own home. So I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. You'll have to find your own place." She went quiet for a beat, just long enough for me to picture her face, stunned, trying to process that I wasn't backing down. Then came the anger. This is petty. It's spiteful. You're trying to ruin my life because I said something in the heat of the moment. I looked out the window, watching a pair of kids build a snowman across the street. It wasn't heat of the moment, I said flatly. It was honesty. You've been pushing me away for years, Brianna. You finally said the quiet part out loud. The silence that followed stretched longer than I expected. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Dad, please, don't do this. Grant doesn't even know yet. I was trying to impress them, okay? His family. They're judgmental and rich, and I didn't want them to see you and judge me for where I came from. I closed my eyes, that last part hitting deeper than anything else. Where she came from. Like I was some shameful footnote in the origin story of her success. You're ashamed of me, I said quietly. You can try to dress it up any way you want, but that's what this is. Her breath hitched. No, I'm not. It's complicated. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. It doesn't have to be. You don't want me in your life, don't want me in that house, fine. But you don't get to have the roof I paid for without the man who paid for it. She started crying then, real sobs. I could hear her try to stifle them, like she was walking into another room. Please, Dad, don't do this. Don't make me leave. We just decorated the nursery. I'm pregnant. My stomach dropped. Not because I was surprised, but because of how she used it, like a bargaining chip. I felt the ache tighten in my chest again, but I kept my voice even. You think that changes anything? I asked. You're having a child. That should have made you think more carefully about what kind of family you want to build. If you can toss your own father aside, what's to stop that baby from growing up and doing the same to you? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture. I just said the words I knew would land the deepest. I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted her to feel the truth she kept dodging. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't mean it. I was just scared. I shook my head, finishing the last sip of my coffee. You don't get to unring that bell, Brie. You told me I wasn't needed. So now you get to prove how unneeded I really am. And with that, I hung up. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down on the table, but I didn't regret it. The waitress came by a minute later with the check. You okay, hon? She asked gently, looking at me like she already knew the answer. I nodded once, slid a few bills under the plate, and stood. Just a long drive ahead, I muttered. She nodded back, her smile sad but kind. Merry Christmas, anyway, she said. I gave her a quiet you too, and left. Outside, the cold hit me hard, biting through my coat. I got in the car and turned on the heat, sitting in the driver's seat as the vents hissed and warmed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired, like I'd been carrying the weight of something invisible for years and only now realized how heavy it had been. Every memory of Brianna as a child, her hand gripping mine in a parking lot, her forehead resting on my shoulder during thunderstorms, her giddy voice calling Daddy from across the playground, played like a movie reel behind my eyes. How did we get here? How does a bond like that turn so brittle? Was it me? Had I failed somewhere along the way? Or was this just the natural decay of love when it's taken for granted too long? That evening, Calvin called back to confirm everything had been processed. The listing was live, and the eviction notice had been sent by courier, formal, legal, and irreversible. She had 7 days to vacate. You sure you're good with this, man? He asked. Because once the notice goes out, I told him yes. I was sure. He didn't push it. Just said he'd let me know if anything changed and hung up. I turned off the radio, sat in my driveway for a long time, and watched the lights blink on in the houses around me. Families gathering, children screaming with joy, the glow of togetherness everywhere I looked. And for the first time, I felt entirely separate from it. Not jealous, not bitter, just outside the bubble. Like I had finally accepted that some doors, once closed, don't reopen. I got up early the next morning and went to church, not for a sermon or some divine clarity, but because I needed a place to sit and think that didn't smell like stale coffee and regret. I sat in the back pew, alone, watching the candles flicker and the choir hum low. I didn't pray. I just breathed. And somewhere in the middle of that silence, I realized something important. This wasn't about punishing Brianna. It was about reclaiming myself. About putting down the burden of being everything for everyone and letting the chips fall where they may. I had spent too long erasing myself for her comfort. It was time she saw the man who built the life she stood on and understood what it meant to take him for granted. The text started before sunrise the next day, first from my sister, then my cousin Lou, then my brother-in-law, each one more urgent than the last, laced with concern masked as judgment. What happened with Brianna? She's in pieces. David, are you seriously evicting your pregnant daughter? This isn't you, man. You're better than this. I didn't respond to any of them at first. I just stared at the glowing screen in the dark, sitting on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, wondering how quickly private decisions become public debates in families. I should have expected it. Families don't whisper anymore, they screenshot. By mid-morning, I got a call from my sister-in-law, Denise, who skipped pleasantries and launched right in. David, I saw what Bree posted on Facebook. You can't just throw her out like this. It's heartless. I felt my jaw tighten, that slow boil beginning to rise in my throat. Did she also post that she told me to my face I wasn't needed on Christmas? That she didn't want me to meet her in-laws because I was an embarrassment? Denise paused for a beat. No, she didn't mention that. Of course she didn't, I said coldly. I'd always been quiet in family circles, the steady one, the dependable one, the man who showed up to every reunion and paid his dues without complaint. So when I made a move this bold, it rattled people. They weren't used to me drawing lines. I'd spent my entire adult life smoothing over problems, offering help without being asked, and swallowing slights for the sake of keeping peace. But now, with one decisive act, I had flipped the script. Suddenly, I wasn't the loyal, long-suffering dad. I was the villain. A daughter scorned made for good gossip, especially when she was pregnant. I didn't even have to read the full post to imagine what it said. Something vague but emotionally loaded. Probably a photo of the house with a caption like, "When the person who raised you tries to break you." I knew the pattern. Play the victim. Let others fill in the blanks. And they did in droves. My niece texted me a screenshot of the comments. Strangers, friends of friends, called me everything from bitter to abusive. He sounds toxic. No real father would do this. Cutting off a pregnant daughter? Shameful. I scrolled for a moment, then turned off my phone. I wasn't going to argue with people who had no idea what they were talking about. But it did wear on me, more than I wanted to admit. Even if I knew the truth, even if I stood firm in my decision, something about being cast as the villain cut deep. I'd spent decades earning the title of good man. And now, in the span of 48 hours, I'd become a cautionary tale. I sat in my living room that evening, lights off, sipping bourbon neat, and wondered how quickly love turns to leverage. I thought of every time I defended Brianna to others, how I'd told friends she was just busy when she forgot my birthday, how I'd laughed off her canceling visits at the last minute, how I'd made excuses for her coldness over the past few years. I had let her behavior slide because she was my daughter, because I loved her, because I thought love meant tolerance. But now, watching the fallout unfold like some family soap opera, I realized love without boundaries becomes something corrosive. It eats away at your dignity. It hollows you out and calls it sacrifice. It wasn't long before Grant called. I recognized his number instantly and debated letting it go to voicemail. But I picked up. His tone was calm, almost diplomatic. "Hey, David," he said. "I wanted to talk man to man, if that's all right." I could already feel the sales pitch coming. "Sure," I replied. "Go ahead." He cleared his throat. "Look, I know things got tense with Bree. She told me about what she said on Christmas. It wasn't okay, and she knows that. But we're asking, just asking, if you'd consider giving us a little more time. We just need a few weeks to get our footing. We've got the baby coming." It's been a hard year. I didn't interrupt him. I let him speak all the way through, because I knew once I answered, it would be final. "Grant," I said slowly, "I've helped you both more than you'll ever know. I gave you that house as a gift because I wanted my daughter to have a foundation. But it turns out I built that foundation on sand. You let her treat me like a ghost, like I wasn't good enough to be seen. And you stood by and watched. So no, you have 1 week. I've already made my peace with it." He was quiet for a moment, then let out a breath. "All right, I understand. I don't agree, but I understand." I could hear the strain in his voice, the edge of frustration barely contained. I didn't care. Understanding wasn't the same as accepting responsibility, and neither of them had done that. Not really. He hung up shortly after, and I sat back in my chair, the phone still in my hand, marveling at how easily they had all come to rely on my silence, on my willingness to absorb disappointment. They had built a life inside a house that was mine and convinced themselves I was just part of the wallpaper, silent, unremarkable, unnecessary. And when I finally stepped forward and said, "No more," they acted like I'd burned the whole place down. The next few days were a blur of fallout. More texts, more calls. Some people tried to guilt me, others to reason. A few, quietly and privately, told me they understood. "She's been cold for years, Dave," my old friend Marshall said. "You did right by her. She just forgot what that looked like." That meant something. Not enough to undo the pain, but enough to remind me I wasn't crazy. On the 7th day, I drove by the house. I didn't stop, didn't go in, just slowed down enough to see the driveway packed with boxes and 2 cars I didn't recognize. Movers, probably. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt still, like I had finally planted my feet in the ground after years of drifting. By the 4th day of the eviction notice, Brianna stopped calling. The silence was loud, louder than her begging, louder than the guilt-tripping texts, louder than Grant's measured disappointment. I didn't know whether it was acceptance or defiance. Maybe she was hoping I'd change my mind if she just gave me enough room to reconsider. Or maybe she was simply too proud to keep asking. Either way, the calls stopped, and in their place came proof that reality was sinking in. I received a call from Calvin letting me know the house had been visited by movers. Boxes were being hauled out. A new forwarding address was submitted for utilities. It was happening. The home I once imagined would stay in the family forever was slowly being dismantled, one packing box at a time. And as strange as it sounds, the confirmation brought no joy, just this quiet ache in the chest, like I'd just watched the last scene of a movie I never wanted to end. That house held more than just drywall and furniture. It held echoes of laughter that used to belong to a younger version of us. I remember installing the hardwood floors with my own hands, cursing under my breath when I nicked the corner of the hallway trying to fit in that damn baseboard. I remembered the summer Brianna and her mother painted the guest room lavender, even though I told them it would look awful in low light. They laughed at me, ganged up on me until I gave in, and in the end, they were right. It turned out beautiful. That room became Brianna's sanctuary when she moved back in after her first heartbreak, and then later, her yoga studio when she started dabbling in wellness. And now it was being emptied. Just like that. No thank you. No parting memory. Just movers carrying pieces of the past into a truck while the girl I raised kept her distance. I sat in my den with a cup of coffee, watching snow start to fall, and wondered how something so small, 7 words said on a porch, could unravel a bond one spent decades building. On the 6th day, I got a text from Grant. Just a photo. It showed the living room of the house, half empty, boxes stacked by the wall, Brianna standing near the mantel with a hand on her lower back. Her face was tired, eyes puffy. She looked like someone barely holding it together. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen, unsure if I was supposed to feel pity or vindication. Was this his way of appealing to my fatherly instincts? Was he hoping I'd see her pain and reverse the decision at the last minute like some dramatic turn in a movie? If so, he misunderstood who I was. I didn't make this choice out of anger. I made it because I needed to draw a line between being a father and being a doormat. I closed the photo, deleted the text, and turned off my phone. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. I couldn't keep reopening wounds she had no intention of healing. That same night, I pulled out the old family photo albums from the hall closet. The kind with the sticky pages and plastic overlays that always curled at the corners. I hadn't looked at them in years. The first picture I turned to was of Brianna at age 7, her hair in crooked pigtails, 2 front teeth missing, smiling like the world belonged to her. I remembered the day clearly. We'd gone to the zoo. She rode on my shoulders for half the afternoon, pointing at animals and asking 100 questions I couldn't always answer. That was the year she started calling me Super Dad, back when I was still her hero. I traced my finger over that photo, then flipped the pages slowly, birthday parties, vacations, science fairs, hospital visits, prom. All of it, a scrapbook of love given freely and fully. And I realized then, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, that she had never stopped being my daughter. I had just stopped being her father the moment I ceased to be useful. And that distinction changed everything. On the 7th day, I returned to the house. I waited until after sunset, when I figured the movers would be gone and the last of the boxes would be loaded. I didn't go to confront them. I didn't want drama. I just needed to see it for myself, to walk those halls one last time before it no longer carried her echo. I parked a block away, walked slowly through the neighborhood, hands in my coat pockets, snow falling lightly on my shoulders. The porch lights were still on. A half bag of trash leaned against the garage. I let myself in with the spare key I'd never taken back, even though I knew this would be the last time I'd use it. Inside, the house was nearly bare. Just a few lingering boxes in the dining room, a forgotten lamp in the corner, and the faint smell of cinnamon air freshener still clinging to the walls. I walked through every room, slowly, like I was saying goodbye to something sacred. The living room, once filled with laughter and movie nights. The kitchen, where I'd taught Brianna how to make pancakes. The hallway, where her mother's framed cross-stitch still hung, tilted slightly to the left. I stopped at the doorway to the room they'd turned into a nursery. It wasn't finished. The crib was half-assembled, the wallpaper halfway up the wall, a box labeled baby clothes still open on the floor. I stood there for a long time, not moving, just looking. I felt 1,000 emotions rise and settle like dust in the air: grief, nostalgia, longing, resolve. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just tired of being the afterthought in a house I built from the ground up. I turned off the light, shut the door, and left the house without looking back. It was no longer mine, not because I sold it, but because the people I gave it to made it clear there was no room for me in it. The official closing happened quietly. A few signatures, some back and forth between Calvin and the buyers, a wire transfer to my account. No celebration, no toast, not even a phone call from Brianna. I didn't expect one. She and Grant had moved out 2 days before the final documents were signed. Calvin told me they left the place clean, even patched a few nail holes in the nursery walls. I took that as a gesture. Not quite an apology, not quite a thank you, but something in between. A small, redemptive detail in a story filled mostly with silence and tension. Still, when the keys were handed over and the sale became final, I felt something close inside me. Not anger, not grief, just closure. The kind that doesn't feel like victory, but rather like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. I didn't call anyone to tell them it was done. I just went home, took off my coat, and stood in the middle of my quiet kitchen with my palms flat on the counter, eyes closed, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd just done. It's a strange thing, grieving someone who's still alive. Stranger still when it's your own child. I'd always thought loss came from death or distance, from life's natural unraveling. But this was different. This was a choice, hers and mine, and it came with a unique brand of sorrow. The kind that's not sharp, but slow-burning. The kind that doesn't demand tears, just stillness. I went days without speaking to anyone. Didn't answer texts, didn't check Facebook. I let the family chatter play out without me. I knew they'd move on. They always did. Eventually, another cousin would get married or someone's kid would make varsity, and I'd become just another complicated story people whispered about at reunions. Remember what happened between David and Brianna? So sad. He used to be such a good father. I used to flinch at the thought of being judged, of being misunderstood. Now, I found a strange peace in it. Let them talk. Let them make me the villain. I knew the truth, and that truth was enough. What people didn't see, what no one ever bothered to ask, was how many quiet moments led up to my decision. It wasn't one slight, or even one Christmas. It was years of diminishing returns. Years of showing up for someone who only saw me when she needed something. Years of holidays spent alone while she posted smiling family photos with Grant's parents. Years of hearing about her life secondhand, through cousins or social media. I was already a ghost in her life long before I made the choice to disappear. The eviction notice wasn't the beginning of our estrangement. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a long, painful sentence. And when I remembered that, I stopped second-guessing myself. I started sleeping better. I even went back to my weekly poker game at the VFW, something I'd skipped for months. The guys didn't ask about Brianna. They just passed the cards, cracked jokes, and let me win a hand or two. It was enough. A week after the house sold, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Brianna. 5 pages, front and back, filled with things I wasn't sure I wanted to read. She started with Dad and ended with Love, Bree, and everything in between was a mixture of apology, explanation, and wounded pride. She admitted she'd handled Christmas poorly. She said she panicked, that she wanted everything to be perfect for her in-laws, and that she'd been ashamed, not of me, but of herself for not being stronger. She wrote that she had been trying to live up to an image, one where she was polished and in control, and that she thought involving me would complicate that. I know it sounds terrible, she wrote, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was just trying to be enough for them. That line stuck with me. I read it over and over. I understood more than I wanted to admit. We all try to be enough for someone. Sometimes we lose ourselves in the process. She didn't ask me to undo anything. She didn't beg for the house back. What she asked for, in a roundabout way, was space. Time. A possible path forward, not a guarantee. I sat with the letter for a long time before responding. I didn't call. I didn't text. I wrote back, 1 page, typed and printed, signed in pen. I told her I loved her, that I always would, that what happened at Christmas didn't break us. It revealed the break that was already there. I told her I hoped the baby arrived healthy and happy. I told her I was open to talking, eventually, but not to picking up where we left off. That place was gone. We'd have to start from a new one, if at all. I mailed it the next morning and felt no anxiety, no anticipation. Just clarity. A line drawn in ink where once there had only been erasers. Now, I wake up early. I walk the neighborhood. I make breakfast for one and enjoy the quiet. I've started reading again. Real books, not just headlines. I'm fixing up the garage too, turning it into a workspace. Maybe I'll build furniture. Maybe I'll just tinker. It doesn't matter. The point is, I'm living in a way that feels deliberate again. Not reactive. Not waiting for a call that may never come. I keep the letter from Brianna in my desk drawer. Not to reread, but as proof that something shifted. That maybe, just maybe, the story isn't over. But I also don't hold on to hope like a lifeline. I've learned that hope without boundaries is just another form of denial. And I've denied myself enough. Sometimes I still think about that Christmas Eve. About the cold on my face, the weight of the cookie tin in my hand, the way her eyes looked right through me. It still hurts, in that dull, familiar way. But I don't let it define me. I don't let it fester. I remind myself that I didn't walk away, I was pushed. And when I finally stood my ground, it wasn't out of anger. It was out of love. Love for myself. Love for the man I was before I became invisible to the people I loved most. I set a boundary and honored it. And in doing so, I found something I hadn't felt in years, dignity. Have you ever been told you're not needed by someone you gave everything to? This story cuts deep because it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your dignity when love turns one-sided. If you've ever had to draw a hard boundary with someone you love, share your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more raw, emotional family stories that remind us why boundaries matter and why sometimes letting go is the bravest thing we can do. See you soon in the next story.